Okay, so we just talked about the codification system. Now, after codification system, we are going to move to the next part, that is system development, that how we go about testing and deployment of a knowledge management system. And this stage happens once you have captured the knowledge from the databases, and then you have gone for codification. So, from codification you are moving to the next stage, that is testing and development. So, in testing and development, basically the main focus is on testing, user acceptance and training. So, we have to discuss about these issues related to system deployment, that is testing and deployment. So, we are going to talk about these issues. So, to start with, you see that one system is developed, then it is related with knowledge sharing, okay, and it contains of these kind of things. So, now we are going to move to some of the definitions. Okay. Now, you have to see that the knowledge management system that you have developed is the right kind of system. It means that it is useful for the organization, it is able to bridge the gap in the knowledge state, and it is also going to be linked with the business goals of the organization. So, if you remember, in the beginning we talked about aligning KM strategy with business strategy, okay, and that is where we try to link KM strategy with knowledge strategy, okay, and also knowledge strategy with the KM. So, you have to see that how once this gap is identified, you have captured the knowledge base that is required by the organization, you have been able to codify it using various systems, either framing or rules or what you call the decision tree, and with the help of this, and then you have a technological system to support it. You have to see whether you have been able to build the right kind of system or not. Okay. So, it is very important in order to validate the system. If the system is not built up rightly, then you have lot of problems. It could be related to storage, it could be related to retrieval, it could be related to use, whatever it is. Okay. So, what are the various parameters of examining whether the system is built in the right way or not? Okay. Starting with the first, whether the database that you have created or the knowledge base that you have created, okay, whether it is organized, classified in a structured format or not, okay, whether it is codified properly, okay, whether it is put into the system, okay, whether you have a good user interface, whether it is IT enabled system or not, whether it is but the most important thing, whether the content is relevant for the knowledge users, that is the employees of the organizations or various other stakeholders. So, these are the various questions that could be asked, okay, which is going to tell you whether the system is built in the right way or not. Now, we will talk about two things, that is testing and deployment. What do you mean by testing? User acceptance testing, that is where you have to check the system's behavior in a realistic environment. Now, the thing is that have we built the right system or not, and then deployment. Then once you have built the system, then you are going to deploy. It means that you are going to transfer that to the organization, the system, so that it is going to operate. Now, I am going to give you one example related to testing and deployment in our context. Say in our organization, in IIT Kharagpur, we developed the ERP system, that is enterprise resource planning system. Enterprise resource system was developed taking into consideration that we were having other systems, but they were fragmented, not integrated system. So, ERP system is the most integrated system which have databases related to all the stakeholders, whether it is faculty, whether it is staff, okay, whether the vendors and suppliers, or whether it is the students. Okay. So, integrating all these databases into one system will help organization to reduce its cost, improve its efficiency, to have all the information whenever required. So, these were the benefits that we are trying to derive having a ERP system. Now, once this ERP system was built, then we wanted to check whether the system is working well or not. Now, in the beginning there were a lot of problems or troubles, okay, because sometimes the system was not giving the right kind of information, or there was information lag was there, the correct information was not actually fed into the data system. So, all kind of problems were coming. So, this kind of problems will happen in the beginning. So, when you are going for user acceptance testing, you have to see and get feedback from your users who are the various stakeholders of the system, and get their feedback whether the system is working for them or not, whether it is working for vendors and suppliers, whether it is working for the students, whether it is working for the faculty, or whether it is working for the staff. So, if it is working well, then you can say yes, that you have built the right kind of system. If it is not working, then you cannot say that you have built the right kind of system. Okay. So, user acceptance is very important. Okay. So, user acceptance, basically once you develop a system, okay, you need to ensure that how does it work in the right realistic environment, that when it is going to be there in the organization, whether it is going to be useful or not. So, if you test it and found that yes, it is going to be useful. So, what you do? You try to start using from one particular setup unit, and then check it whether for that particular unit it is working, and if you find that it is working, then you can move to other systems and deploy the system for the all the units of the organization. So, you start with one unit of the organization, and then you can include or incorporate the entire organization, right? See whether it is working or not. Now, what are the issues that you are going to consider to test a system? Okay. Now, there is lot of issues, because when it comes to codifying tacit knowledge, okay, which is highly subjective, okay, how it is measured, how it is codified. Okay. So, you have to see whether the tacit knowledge is properly codified because of its nature. Okay. If it is not properly codified, then it is not going to be very useful. Suppose you are going to observe certain processes, but if you miss certain things out of these processes, probably the other person who want to make use of those processes will not be able to use it. So, you have to see that whenever you are going to codify tacit knowledge, make sure that it is done completely and nothing is left out, because if anything is left out, then it remains subjective. You are not going to make it explicit to the person, okay, because it is very difficult to measure the ability or the process which is related to individuals, that is basically the tacit knowledge. Then the second part is lack of reliable specifications make knowledge based testing arbitrary. Okay. How we are going to check the consistency of the system? What are the criteria that you are going to make use to test the system? Okay. Whether you have standard criteria, I have used some random criteria to test it. Okay. So, you need to identify those criteria which are very consistent to see whether this knowledge based system is going to work or not. Okay, the second part. Third is consistency and correctness. How consistently this system is working. Okay. For example, today's system is working, tomorrow it is not working. It is creating trouble. It is creating errors. Okay. Then you can say that yes, the system is not reliable or it is not consistently working well, and there are a lot of problems or issues. And these problems or issues could be for various reasons. It could be related to technical errors, or it could be related to input error also. So, you have to see that there is no technical error or there is no input error. Input error means the data side. Okay. So, all the data that is fed is correct, and then you can say that yes, input error is not there, and the technical error means that the kind of system that you have deployed for storage and retrieval is proper. So, that it is arranged and organized in a proper way, and it does not create any problem. There is negligence in testing. Okay. Sometimes what happens, we develop a system and we start using it without going for testing. Okay. So, it is very important to go for some kind of pilot testing before you put it to use for the entire organization. It is very important. Okay. If you neglect this issue, probably it may fail. If it fails, probably the entire operations related to knowledge management system is going to be a wasteful expenditure. Okay. Then sometimes there is an excuse that there is no time for checking the system, and let us start using it. Okay. There could be a short term gain, but in the long term it is not good, because if you do not check the system for its reliability, for its consistency, for its accuracy, okay, then what will happen? If system fails, then who is to be blamed? Okay. you are going to blame it to knowledge developers, are you going to blame it to the experts, are you going to blame it to the technology. Okay. So, it is important to ensure that system is tested before it is put to use, okay. And then you need to solve the problems related to user interfaces, right. These user interfaces could be at a different level, it could be at the end user level, it could be at the intermediary level, right, and it could be at the top level. Like there are certain data which could be accessed only by the top management people. So, make sure that that kind of interface is provided to those people. At the intermediary level, you are going to provide those who are going to operate the system. At the user level, you are going to provide it to all the customers, relevant customers, and then you have a system for user interface, like for students you have a system, for faculty you have a system, okay, which is integrated with the ERP system. So, this you have to see that how complex you are going to make user interface. Say for example, if internet is not working, right, I want to access relevant information using internet. Okay. So, with whom I am going to interact and relate with? It could be the developers or the system management people, because as a end user I cannot correct the problem. So, the intermediate level, the system analyst or the developers or the programmers must be in contact with the end user, so that they can solve these problems, right. So, you need to develop this user interface in such ways, so that it is easy to use, especially for the end users, and then you develop different layers of users at different level. That is very important, and that is what needs to be considered. Next, what are the attributes of the logical testing? Circular. Circular means what? It has to move into a circle, starting with one point, then you move to that point. What does it mean? What does it mean is that, okay, there is a cycle. Okay. So, if you look at, we talked about knowledge capture, then codification, then move to the next part, that is testing and development, then you move to the next part, and finally again you move to this same cycle. So, since the knowledge management system is cyclical in nature, you make sure that each and every stage you are going to test the validity of the system, okay, and then make sure that it is complete. Okay. Completeness, it must be complete in itself, okay. And then confidence, those who are using the system must be confident in the sense that this system is good, is relevant, they can make use of it, and there are several other issues related to confidence. It means the issues related to privacy. Okay. For example, I am going to use my login password to access certain data. Okay. It could be related to me, but the same data should not be available to others except at the intermediate level or the senior level, right. So, the users must have confidence in the system before they start using it, and for that you also need to train them that how to develop the use the system, and then you must develop them the kind of confidence that is required to use the system. Then correctness, okay. Correctness, how accurate the system is. Accurate in the accurateness of the system depends upon the kind of the quality and quantity of data that you have put in. So, I am not talking about the quantity of data, but I am talking about the quality of data. So, how you ensure the quality of information that you have put in, okay. That is very important, and that is going to tell you whether the data, the input that is put into the system is correct or not. Okay. Then consistency and inconsistency, that is related to reliability, how reliable that information is, whether when you are asking whether you are getting the similar kind of information, or every time you are getting different kind of information from the system. So, if you are getting different kind of system related to particular query, it means the system is not reliable. You put a query to the system related to particular aspect and you get consistent information which is similar in nature, then you can say yes, it is consistent, you are getting reliable information. Then redundancy, you also need to weed out the redundant part on a regular basis, that is very important, because the knowledge base or the database that you have created, or the information that you have put in, okay, should not be obsolete or outdated. So, make sure that you are not going to have redundant data. So, the principle is garbage in and garbage out. Okay. It means whatever garbage that is collected in the bin is to be taken out, so that you can put in new data into the bin, and that is very important. Otherwise, what will happen? This bin become redundant. So, the knowledge management system that you have developed, make sure that you are going to update it with relevant knowledge on a regular basis. Otherwise, after a period of time, it is going to be redundant. So, this testing has to be done on a regular basis to ensure there is no redundancy in the data that is there. And then we have already talked about the reliability factor. You make sure that the data is reliable, right? Okay. And then there could be some errors, subsumption errors, and that could be identified. So, you should be in a position to identify the error in the data. Okay. So, the system developers or the knowledge developers who are going to codify the knowledge into the system have to ensure that how they are going to identify the error, if any there is, into the system. Okay. So, these are the attributes which could help you to identify and test whether the knowledge system, the knowledge management system that you have built up is the right kind of system. So, this is the process of verification for testing, okay, that we have just discussed about it. Now, if you look at it, it talks about the verification process. Okay. So, there are two ways to do it: verify knowledge base formations, how the knowledge has been created, knowledge base is formed, and whether the knowledge base is functioning effectively or not. Okay. So, this talks about capturing and codification, and this talks about functionality, that is use. Okay. Now, if you look at this, look at the structural verification anomalies. Okay. Circular rules and redundancy, this is to be identified. Okay. Now, circular rules we have just discussed about it. Then redundancy we have also talked about it. Make sure that there is no data redundant. So, when you are going to create knowledge, make sure that it is updated and redundancy is avoided. Okay. So, you need to identify certain rules of logic to ensure that all redundant data is kept out. Okay. And in the process, you have to see that certain data which may be duplicate or subsumed is weeded out, right, in the process. So, and you are also going to not only verify the anomalies in the data, so it is consistent, but also verify the content in terms of its completeness, consistency, and correctness. So, these are the criteria for content verification. If you look at this, we talked about completeness, confidence, and correctness. It is very important to ensure the content that is put into the knowledge management system is complete in itself. Okay. So, you do not have to look for that kind of information elsewhere. It is consistent, is reliable, and correct. The content is, the quality of the content is to be looked into. Now, these issues are related to knowledge base formation. Now, moving from knowledge base formation to next part, that is verify knowledge base functionality. When I am talking about knowledge base functionality, it is basically related to two issues, that is confidence and reliability. Okay. So, if people have confidence, okay, they know that secrecy is not going to be out, okay, they are trained to use it, then probably they would be in a better position to use it. And then you also check that reliability, when consistently you are getting all the information that is required. So, there are certain things that need to be looked into, that you need to avoid redundancies in the data, make sure that it is complete, consistent, and correct, and at the same time you make sure that people are able to make use of it. So, if you have developed a good system, then it is enabled through intranet and other things probably, and people are trained, then probably you can verify the functionality of the knowledge base, that is it is functional, people are going to use it for productive purposes, right. So, these are the approaches to logical testing, that is what we discussed about here in a graphical format. Now, moving from this to the next part, that how to identify the errors in the system or the process. Okay. Like circular errors. What is circular errors? It is tend to be contradictory in meaning or logic. It means that circular error means that it is a cycle. So, one leads to other. So, it is happening in the similar direction. Otherwise, you can identify that yes, if it is not logically connected, it means that it is not correct. Okay. So, you cannot go for creation of knowledge a codification of knowledge before it is captured or created. Okay. So, this process to be followed in its the proper cycle, and that is what I am talking about, the circular errors. The next part is redundancy errors. Okay. So, you have to identify problems related to the data. So, there is no duplication of knowledge, I mean the similar knowledge in different forms is not available. Similarly, this redundancy also talks about obsolete or outdated knowledge which is put into the system. So, need to ensure that obsolete and outdated information is kept out of the purview of the people, because it is often used and it is going to keep a lot of space in the system and it has no value. So, you need to ensure that only those knowledge content is available which is of relevance and value to the people. Okay. And then you also need to identify unusable knowledge. Okay. Unusable knowledge is knowledge that comes up if the conditions succeed or fail. Okay. So, you need to identify those knowledge which is not being used by the people. Okay. Because if the knowledge is not being used people, then there is no question of having success or failure. Okay. See, we get lot of books and journals in the library. Now, the thing is whether all of us are using them properly or not. If it is not being used, then how are we going to say that okay, this is good or bad, or whether we are going to succeed or fail using this. So, it is very important to ensure that you get only that kind of thing which is going to be which is going to help you to succeed. Okay. Otherwise, you are going to fail. And then there are subsumption errors. Basically, if one rule is true, one knows the second rule is always true. Okay. What does it mean? How are we going to explain this subsumption errors in the rules? Okay. For example, if we say okay, A is x, okay, then we say B is x. So, can we say that A is B? Logically, we can say, because if A is x, B is x, it means A is equal to B, because A and B denotes to the similar things, right. But if you say A is x, B is y, then we cannot say that A is B, because they denotes two different things. Okay. So, if one rule is true, the the one knows that the second rule is going to be true. Okay. So, if one is A is x, B is x, the second rule is A equal to B. Okay. So, that is correct. Okay. This is subsumption. It means we assume that okay, this is based on the first rule. Okay. So, if logically you are trying to connect first with the second rule. Okay. Now, inconsistent knowledge. Okay. Inconsistent knowledge where the same inputs yield different results. Okay. Suppose you have data. Okay. If you are going to analyze the data, whosoever analyzes the data, you come out with the similar results. Okay. But if you two people are analyzing data, the same data using two different approaches, but coming out with two different results, it means either there is a fault in the method or in the data that is to be identified. So, when I am talking about inconsistent knowledge, either there is a fault in coding the data, so that data is not proper, data is not correct, or the methodology that you have adopted to analyze the data is not correct. Okay. Right. So, you have to see that if there are similar inputs, it should provide similar results, otherwise it is not consistent. Okay. Then moving to the next part, that is steps in user acceptance testing, how we go about it. So, you need to create a team for testing purpose, that is very, very important. Select a person or team for testing, okay. And this team should be responsible for validating and verifying the system. Okay. And then you decide the criteria. Okay. You can use the rules of logic that we have just talked about. Okay. So, you have to decide on user acceptance test criteria. Okay. These are the criteria that we will be using, okay, for verification of the knowledge or functionality of knowledge. So, in both the cases you need to identify certain rules, like you want to see whether it is complete, correct, consistent, at the same time there is no redundancy errors, and then you also see whether whether the system is working or not. Okay. In the sense that people have confidence and reliability. So, the things that we have just talked about can be used as a criteria for user acceptance testing. So, you need to decide which criteria we are going to adopt for testing, acceptance testing, right, and then you develop certain test cases. Okay. You take some departments from different parts of the organization and try to use it and see whether it is being validated to start with. That is what we know as pilot testing. So, you should go for pilot testing to start with, to check whether this system is working in certain cases or not. If it is working, then you go for deploying it to other places. Okay. Then you maintain a log on various versions of the test and the results. Okay. So, you also document the test, that there is test results so that you will be in a position to say or communicate to the people that and give feedback how well the system is working. Okay. So, you tell them that these are the criteria, and on these criteria we have tested the system and it is working or not working, and these are the results of the system. And then you go for field testing. Okay. Test it into the organization, see whether it is working or not. If it is working, well and good. If it is not working, then again you look at the entire cycle again, starting with knowledge capturing, codification, and then move to the testing and deployment to see where the fault lies. So, we have already talked about this criteria, selection criteria. So, this could be used as a selection criteria, like how accurate and correct are outcome that is coming out of the system, whether the testing is going to adapt to the changing environment or not. So, you have to see whether you are going to use it and able to adapt yourself to the system or not. Okay. How adequate solutions you are getting out of the system, whether the system is able to provide you good solutions of your problem or not. If yes, or the extent to which may not be 100%, but maybe if it is 60%, 70%. So, you decide what success rate you are looking forward to, and accordingly you decide whether it is working or not. Then the next is appeal and usability of the system, how good it is in terms of use. Okay. Whether people are able to make use of it or not, and what are the problems and how we are going to address those problems. Okay. That is related to what you call appeal and usability. Okay. So, there are certain problems, so you need to address them, the people appeal about that, so address it, so that you are able to make the system usable. Then easy of use, how smooth access is there. Okay. So, there could be technological factors or other factors to make sure that you are going to develop a system where the storage and retrieval, especially retrieval and application is very smooth. Okay. And then you also look at the face validity, at the face of it whether it is working or not. So, you look into the credibility factor. If the system is credible, it should definitely work to start with, and that is where we do not look into the other form of validity, but at the face of it the system appears to be okay. Okay. So, first of all you see that whether at the face of it system is credible, and then you go for testing it further validity, right, and whether whatever expectations you have out of the system, whether it is meeting those expectations or not. Okay. What I mean to say is that when you are developing a knowledge management system, it has certain objectives. Okay. The objective is to create a knowledge system, relevant knowledge system, which people can use for their work, and whether people are really using it and ready to in a position to solve their problem. If that is so, then you can say yes, the knowledge you have deployed a good knowledge management system and it is helping people to arrive at the solutions. Okay. And it must be robust in the sense that it is not easily bifurcated, hacked, okay, ethically correct, and these kind of issues are there. Robustness, it has a very sound system, technically very sound system, so that it is going to work, and it is very strong system. Okay. And then you go for technical and operational tests. Okay. You make sure that you meet all the technical and operational requirements, okay, before you accept the system for deployment. Okay. So, these are the different kind of criteria for user acceptance and testing. Okay. Then the next stage is managing the testing phase, and in this phase basically you are trying to say when, what, how and where to evaluate the knowledge base. So, it is very important when you are going to, especially this phase, that is where you are going to test the system. Then you have to answer these questions, that who is going to do logical testing, okay, who is going to do user acceptance testing, what are the evaluation criteria that you have decided in advance, how we are going to make use of this evaluation criteria, decide what should be recorded during the test, what you are going to document that. Okay. Then you are going to review training cases, whether you have been, it is provided by the experts or not, or the knowledge developers or the user, whether you have provided enough training to the people, whether it is the end user or say knowledge developers or the experts, and then you type all rules by type 1 or type 2 error. Type 1 and type 2 error basically refers to when you assume that certain things are correct, but it is not, and type 2 is that when you assume that it is correct, it is not correct, but it becomes correct. Okay. So, these kind of errors should be avoided, type 1 and type 2 error. Okay. So, thank you, that is all for this session.